You know that feeling when you can sense something ending and there's no turning back? That was the atmosphere inside Edinburgh's royal estate as Princess Anne walked those familiar halls for the very last time. But this wasn't just silence. It was heavy, sacred, the kind that wraps around you like a final curtain, signaling the close of something irreplaceable. Loyal staff, many who had dedicated decades to her service, stood frozen. Some tried to hold back tears. Others didn't even try. The woman they'd trusted, admired, and served for over half a century was leaving. And not for a retreat, not for rest, but for good. No announcements, no headlines, no royal fanfare. Just the quiet echo of her footsteps, the soft rustle of her coat, and a tidal wave of emotion no one was ready for. For the most steady and disciplined member of the royal family to leave without ceremony, that was the true shock. Not only because of what she meant, but because of what her departure now represented to those inside the royal inner circle. A shift was coming. This wasn't just a farewell to a cherished royal. It marked the closing of a chapter. And behind her elegant exit lay something even more haunting. A private journal, a sealed letter, and a long-held truth she had never dared speak until now. Chapter 1. Anne's Legacy, the Crown's Relentless Worker. In a royal family often overshadowed by scandals, headlines, and spectacle, Princess Anne was the quiet exception. No drama, no public image campaigns, no carefully crafted narratives, just pure, tireless service. Steady, unglamorous, and unwavering. For over 50 years, Anne served as the monarchy's driving force. While others found themselves scrutinized for their wardrobes, relationships, or tabloid-worthy moments, Anne was out doing the work, conducting military inspections, visiting hospitals, attending charity functions, and representing the crown abroad. Year after year, while the cameras focused on her brothers or younger royals, she quietly amassed more than 20,000 official engagements, an astounding figure by any measure. But it wasn't just the sheer number, it was the consistency. Anne didn't cancel. She didn't delay. She always showed up, and she did it all with the same quiet dignity, whether shaking hands with a farmer or a world leader. Between 2011 and 2019, she regularly outpaced even the reigning monarch in annual engagements. She's the hardest working royal, longtime staff have said, and they weren't exaggerating. It was simply the truth. Yet beyond the statistics, there was something deeper. Anne didn't just perform duties, she believed in them. To her, service wasn't a privilege, it was a commitment. Duty wasn't a slogan or performance, it was a way of life. Insiders often noted that Anne didn't need reminders. She memorized her schedule, down to the minute. While others leaned on aides and assistants, Anne kept her own briefing materials organized and ready. No excuses, no entourage, just a relentless work ethic. That's what made her essential. While the rest of the royal household faced public relations crises, family tensions, and resignations, Anne remained steady. She didn't solve the chaos, but she never added to it. She just did what needed doing. Recognition never seemed to interest her. In fact, she often appeared uncomfortable in the spotlight. As one military officer once observed, Princess Anne is allergic to ceremony when it's about her. To the public, she was low profile, but within palace walls, she was irreplaceable, a stabilizing force, a quiet backbone when everything else felt uncertain. So when whispers of her stepping away began to circulate, it didn't feel like a simple shift in scheduling. It felt seismic, as though something solid and long relied upon had slipped away. Princess Anne was never one for dramatic exits, but the silence that followed her departure spoke volumes. Because when the royal family's most dependable figure walks out without a word, the palace starts to feel it, and people begin to wonder. Chapter 2. The Final Days in Edinburgh. In her final weeks at the estate, Princess Anne's daily routine remained unchanged, but the atmosphere around her shifted entirely. She still rose early, dressed with her usual simplicity, and walked the grounds. But those familiar strolls grew slower, longer, more thoughtful. Staff who had known her for decades noticed subtle changes, not in her speech, but in her stillness. The way she paused at doorways, the moments she stood quietly at the base of a staircase, the silent stops by the old garden gate. She lingered, one staff member recalled, like she was trying to absorb every detail for the last time, without letting anyone see. There was no official notice, no announcement, but those closest to her sensed it deep down. She was preparing to say goodbye. And she did it the only way she knew how, with intention, with grace, and without fanfare. One morning, the gardener's teenage son received a signed photo. No note, just Anne's signature and a quiet thank you. The housekeeper who had brought her morning tea for 15 years found a handwritten message on her tray. "You always made the start of my day feel calm." Thank you. She had never heard those words aloud, but written out, they landed like a thunderclap. Inside her private quarters, everything was in perfect order. Her wardrobe was neatly arranged, her desk was cleared, a slim leather journal rested in the top drawer, closed. She hadn't written in it for days. It was as if there was nothing left to say. Her longtime valet, who had accompanied her on countless tours across continents, noticed something in her eyes he couldn't quite name. Not exhaustion, not sadness, just emptiness. It was like she had poured the last of herself into this place, he confided, and there was simply nothing more to give. On the final day, no speech was made. None was needed. The staff gathered, quietly without instruction, by the front entrance. Some wore their uniforms. Others came as they were. They weren't just employees. They had been part of her world. For some, most of their lives. They stood and watched, and when the car door finally closed behind her, it felt like a chapter had sealed itself shut. They say you never truly feel the weight of someone until they're gone. That day, within the silent halls of the estate, the staff felt the full weight of Princess Anne. Chapter 3. The Mysterious Letter and Journal. Left behind. Princess Anne's departure wasn't just quiet, it was deliberate. And in the hours after she slipped away from the estate, it became clear she hadn't left without leaving something behind. According to palace insiders, just moments before stepping into her car, Anne handed her private secretary a sealed envelope. No speech, no instructions, just a knowing glance, the kind she had perfected over the years. A look that simply meant, "You'll understand." Inside was a brief handwritten note, not a message for the public, but a farewell to the people who had stood by her side the longest. Those who read it were reportedly moved to tears, because Anne had never been known for sentimentality. Her leadership came through action, not words. But in just a few lines of ink, she revealed a depth of feeling few had ever witnessed from her. But the true surprise came later, when a trusted aide returned to tidy up her study. In the top drawer of her desk, tucked neatly away, was a small leather-bound journal. No insignia, no royal markings, just a plain, worn notebook, its corners slightly frayed. It looked ordinary, but what it contained was anything but. Anne had been writing in that journal for years, possibly decades. Dozens of entries in her sharp, deliberate handwriting. Some brief, just a date and a thought. Others deep and contemplative, laced with raw honesty. One phrase appeared over and over again. "The day everything changed, I knew I couldn't stay." No one could say with certainty what that day was, but many believe it marked the period after Queen Elizabeth's death. From that point onward, Anne's entries took a turn, growing more introspective, more guarded, and unmistakably heavier. She wrote of cracks in the foundation, of traditions being diluted, and of loyalties that no longer felt returned. She didn't name names. She didn't need to. The disillusionment was clear, but the most haunting revelation came in the journal's final pages. Anne described a private letter, one that had been given to her by Queen Elizabeth herself, allegedly in the final days before the Queen's health declined. According to Anne's entry, the letter was never meant to be shared. It was, as she wrote, between a mother and daughter and a crown. To this day, no one outside that circle has seen the letter. Its contents remain a mystery. But what Anne wrote afterward left no doubt. Whatever the Queen confided in her had changed her forever. Because this wasn't just a goodbye to loyal staff or a cherished estate. This was Princess Anne setting down a truth she had carried in silence for far too long, and choosing, at last, to walk away from the weight of it. Chapter 4. Camilla's rise and the tension Anne couldn't ignore. Inside palace walls, it was no secret. Princess Anne and Queen Camilla were never close. Outwardly, they were polite, cordial. They stood shoulder to shoulder when duty required it. But those who observed them closely knew. Beneath the formal smiles, the warmth was never real. And now looking back, many believe Camilla's quiet ascent within the royal hierarchy played a far greater role in Anne's exit than anyone was willing to say out loud. For Anne, royal life had never been about public approval or polished performances. It was about discipline, tradition, and an unshakable sense of duty. And in many ways, Camilla represented the opposite. Over the past 20 years, Camilla had undergone a remarkable reinvention, from one of the monarchy's most controversial figures to a polished, media-savvy queen consort. She embraced public appearances, aligned herself with charitable causes, charmed the press, and even began to show a light, humorous side in front of the cameras. To much of the public, it worked. Slowly, she won people over. But to Anne, it didn't sit well. Those close to the situation say Anne never truly forgave the emotional wounds caused by Camilla's presence during the most turbulent period of the family's history, particularly the damage it inflicted on Princess Diana. Anne had seen it all firsthand. She had heard Diana's tears behind closed doors, witnessed the emotional strain as the fairy tale marriage publicly unraveled, and watched as Charles and Camilla's connection persisted, first discreetly, then defiantly. Anne never addressed it publicly, but her silence wasn't apathy, it was resistance. Rather than confront Camilla directly, Anne stood her ground in quieter ways. She embodied the values she believed Diana had fought for: grace, steadfastness, and a loyalty not to popularity, but to purpose. But their differences went deeper than demeanor. They were rooted in principle. Anne had been born into royalty, trained from birth in the unspoken rules and sacred customs of the institution. She respected adaptation when necessary, but believed the core of the monarchy, its reverence and restraint, must remain intact. In her eyes, Camilla's path to the crown, shaped by scandal and controversy, had bypassed that tradition. It left a mark the monarchy never truly addressed. So when Camilla stepped into the shoes once worn by Queen Elizabeth, something shifted within Anne. Some insiders say she saw it as a betrayal of everything the crown was meant to stand for. Others believe it simply confirmed what she had feared for years, that the royal family was evolving into something she no longer recognized. But Anne never raised her voice. She never issued a statement. She simply began to step back. And for someone like Anne, who had spent her life showing up, staying the course, and never flinching, her quiet withdrawal spoke louder than any protest ever could. Chapter 5. A family divided: Charles, Catherine, and the future of the monarchy. In the public, the royal family presents a united front, but behind palace doors, the fractures are unmistakable. At the top sits King Charles, a man shaped by tradition, bound to protocol, and deeply committed to preserving the monarchy as a symbol of historical continuity. For him, formality isn't optional. It's the foundation that keeps the entire institution standing. Then there's Catherine. With Queen Elizabeth gone and Meghan out of the spotlight, the Princess of Wales has emerged as the modern face of the monarchy. She blends royal duty with approachability, posing for selfies, comforting children, and wearing high street brands to signal that she's of the people, not just above them. And caught somewhere between those two worlds was Princess Anne. Never quite a reformer, never entirely a traditionalist, Anne stood firm in her belief that the crown was not meant to be casual. But over time, the middle ground she once occupied began to disappear. Insiders say Anne increasingly felt like the odd one out. Her quiet, behind-the-scenes style of service no longer matched the monarchy's growing fixation on optics, headlines, and public sentiment. The push toward relatability made her uneasy. She reportedly grew frustrated by what she saw as theatrics, royal engagements that prioritized appearance over substance. She didn't believe royalty needed to be liked, one aide revealed. She believed it needed to be respected. That's not the same thing. In the months after Queen Elizabeth's death, the internal divide deepened. Strategic meetings grew tense. Debates over direction became more frequent. Lines were drawn. Meanwhile, Catherine's influence only grew stronger. From high-profile charity work to her increasingly confident public image, she became, intentionally or not, the face of the monarchy's next chapter. Some within the palace even referred to her as the quiet reboot. And Anne? She pressed on with her duties. She showed up, did the work, and asked for little in return. But her demeanor shifted. She spoke less. Her once curious questions during briefings grew fewer. She smiled less often. According to one longtime staffer, she even began arriving earlier to events and leaving sooner. Almost as if she were trying to avoid conversations she no longer felt part of. She didn't complain, the staffer said. She didn't need to. You could feel it. She sensed the monarchy was changing, and she no longer knew where she fit within it. Some believe Anne quietly supported Catherine's direction. There was mutual respect between them, even if their approaches differed. But Anne didn't want to evolve into a symbol of something she didn't truly believe in. She wanted to serve, plain and simple. And as the space for pure service shrank, overtaken by media strategy, curated appearances, and public perception, Anne responded in the only way that felt true to her. She quietly stepped back. Chapter 6. Queen Elizabeth's Secret Letter, a legacy shared in silence. In the final pages of Princess Anne's journal, there was one line that staff say lingered in their minds long after reading it. "My mother gave me the truth, and now it's mine to protect." Written with quiet precision, no decoration, no drama, just a simple, weighty sentence. And for those who knew Anne best, it explained everything. Her decision to step away wasn't an act of rebellion, it was an act of inheritance. Palace insiders reveal that, sometime before Queen Elizabeth's health began to decline, she handed Anne a sealed letter. There was no fanfare, no witnesses, and no official record. It wasn't for the public. It wasn't even addressed to the institution. It was meant for Anne alone, her only daughter. What the letter said remains a mystery. No one outside of Anne has ever seen it. But based on what she left behind, it's clear this wasn't a ceremonial farewell. It wasn't a final blessing or a note of encouragement. It was heavier, more personal. It was a transfer of truth. Some believe the letter contained unspoken concerns, private doubts the Queen had long harbored about the future of the monarchy. Others suspect it was more intimate, filled with regrets, reflections, and thoughts about Charles's leadership or Camilla's emerging role. Anne never spoke of it, never acknowledged it publicly, but after her mother's passing, she became the sole guardian of that truth. She tried to carry it the way she had always carried duty, quietly, diligently, without complaint. She kept attending engagements, kept walking the royal halls, but something in her had undeniably shifted. She wasn't bitter, one aide recalled. She was grieving, but not just for her mother, for what the monarchy was becoming in her absence. If the Queen's letter truly held personal reflections about the Crown's direction or unspoken discomfort about Camilla's rise, then Anne's quiet withdrawal begins to make perfect sense. She wasn't just stepping back from royal life. She was protecting something sacred, something passed down to her not in public ceremony, but in private confidence. Perhaps that's why she left without a word, why she declined interviews, farewell events, or final statements. She didn't need the world to understand, because only two people ever truly could: the Queen who wrote the letter and the daughter who now carries its weight in silence. Chapter 7. Anne's Message to the Public. The Quiet Power of Walking Away. In a time when every royal gesture is captured, dissected, and broadcast around the globe, Princess Anne stood apart for her unwavering silence. She never gave tell-all interviews, never cashed in on memoirs, never offered the public a curated glimpse behind palace walls. And yet, in hindsight, her silence may have been her loudest message. Because Anne didn't just step away from her royal duties, she left behind an example. An unspoken reminder that true service isn't flashy. It's steady. It's humble. It doesn't seek applause. It quietly earns respect. For over 5 decades, Anne never chased the spotlight. While others folded under pressure, or leaned into public sympathy, she kept her head down and got the job done. Her presence was constant, but never overbearing, showing up when needed, never staying longer than necessary, and never asking for recognition. And now in stepping back, she's once again done something few in the royal family have managed. She's made a powerful statement without uttering a word. Her departure wasn't just a personal decision. It was symbolic, a quiet stand, a reflection of what the institution used to be, and a subtle critique of what it's becoming. Because when someone like Anne, born into royalty, molded by its discipline, and revered as its most dependable figure, chooses to walk away, people take notice. They begin to wonder, what changed? Was it the internal politics? The shift from principle to performance? The growing focus on image over integrity? Anne won't say. She never will. That's never been her way. But her actions speak clearly. You can be loyal to the crown without losing yourself to it. You can serve with honor and still know when it's time to let go. And maybe that's what made her so invaluable. Not because she stayed forever, but because she had the wisdom to know when it was time to leave. Quietly, gracefully, on her own terms.